Thomas Treiber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. I'm your host for the show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I want to welcome in my two co-hosts. First up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I'm doing really, really well. Excited to be on. I'm always excited to be on and talk boxing with you guys, so let's get it going.
All right, and next up, of course, as always, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Good to be here, Mike.
You sound bored, John.
I'm just ready to go. I'm saving up my energy.
All right. Well, you just ran 7 miles today, so you have to. And if you can notice, I'm trying to make my voice sound deeper because I want to go to Belfast one of these days and be the understudy for my next guest. Help me welcome to the show, Thomas Treiber. How you doing, Thomas?
Hey, thank you very much, Mike, for being here. And I'm very impressed by your pipes so far.
You just help him with his pronunciations, Thomas. Then
I'm good. I can only do the American fighters, though. And actually, I can only do about half of them.
Yeah, and that's hit or miss too. So.
Yeah, and we all know Thomas is going to be doing the Frampton-Donaire card in Belfast, Ireland. And, I mean, just for what I remember from when I was younger and watching, and especially watching Barry McGuigan there, I mean, that has to be an awesome experience to be in front of that crowd.
I'll tell you what, the SSE Arena is incredibly enthusiastic. Every time I've been there, it used to be called the Odyssey Arena before becoming SSE Arena, and I had done a Tyson Fury fight there before, and the fans were great then. But I'll tell you what, nothing tops the fans the last time I was there when Carl Frampton fought and returned to fighting in Belfast, and just super excited to be back there again this Saturday night. And what a fight it can be with Frampton versus Donaire. Really expecting a great fight.
All right, so before we get to that card, though, you brought up Tyson Fury. So, of course, he signed with Frank Warren this week. What's your take on the news with Fury, and how do you think they'll work him into this? It looks slowly, at first at least.
Yeah, according to Frank Warren, I've seen some interviews with him online, and he's going to move him along slowly. They've announced June 9th that he'll be fighting on a show in Manchester, and looks like they're going to try and move him along and hopefully get that fight that everybody wants to see between him and Joshua. I think that would just be one of the biggest fights ever in the UK. They both beat Klitschko, both guys undefeated. I mean, it really doesn't get much bigger than that in the heavyweight division. So very excited to have Tyson Fury part of the Frank Warren family, if you will. And I'm excited because this will give me an opportunity to do some more fights with Tyson Fury, and many people will be watching. So just a very exciting time to be part of Frank Warren's company.
Yeah, and Jeremiah, what's your take on Tyson Fury coming back? I mean, I know it's been a while since he's been in there, but a lot of people still consider him a lineal heavyweight champion.
Well, I think a lot of us are excited for Tyson Fury to come back simply because the division has become so thin lately. Tyson Fury, he presents a stylistic challenge for just about anybody out there. And I think after Joshua's performance against Parker, I think a lot more people are weighing Fury's style a bit more heavily there because, say what you want about, the fight against Klitschko and how uneventful it was. He's a big guy who can jab, he can move a little bit. His hand speed is pretty good for a big guy. And as Thomas is talking about, it's a domestic showdown, with the enthusiasm of the British fans, which far exceeds whatever we've got in the States. Honestly, I see more enthusiasm in a game of darts in the UK than I see in a professional playoff game in the United States. I kid you not. I've seen some darts on British TV. They get really into it. I was actually at a playoff game. I saw the Broncos Steelers years back, and it's just pretty drab for the most part until an exciting play happens, and then it's it's up and down for a little bit, but you can just feel it in the air with the Brits. I mean, you even look at lower level guys like Josh Warrington, and it's just throughout the entire arena. So I think, Tyson Fury coming back slowly, I think that's a good thing. I was hoping that he wouldn't come back and jump right into the big boys. After a 2-year layoff, you got to get yourself back into shape. You got to get back in the groove of things. And so, yeah, I'm happy that he's back. And again, I think he presents a stylistic challenge for anybody out there.
Now, my question with the darts, because I've never watched it from England, Jeremiah, but I'm going to have to break out my Fire Stick and check it out. But if there ends up being a confrontation and the two guys get mad at each other, do they ever throw the darts at each other?
I've never seen that, to be honest, but I wouldn't be half surprised if it happened.
Because that would be awesome to watch. John, what's your take on Tyson Fury coming back?
Well, I'm excited for Thomas and Frank Warren to have signed him. I think it's good opportunity. There's going to be a lot of excitement with the Brits there, but I've got a different view on it. I've said this for a while, and I'll say it again tonight. Now that we at least have a date for a Tyson Fury fight, we still have to see if it comes off. No opponent's been announced yet, but I think he'd be better off just coming right back against Joshua. He'll get stopped, but I don't think this is ultimately going anywhere anyway. He's been off for 2.5 years. His fight with Klitschko was the worst lineal heavyweight championship fight I've ever seen. There was rounds literally when there was like 5 punches thrown between both of them. Klitschko was obviously well past it. He looked like a zombie in there, and Tyson Fury was backing off like a non-combatant. I think with the offense that Wilder and Joshua bring, even though Tyson Fury's defensive and he's 6'9", I don't think it's going to work out well for him. My thinking is, enough fans can figure things out that if he comes back against a few mediocre opponents and he doesn't. Let's say now we're 3.5 years maybe past the Klitschko fight, 4 years or something. I don't know if that excitement is going to be at a fever pitch. It'll still be very big in the UK, and I'm not saying it's not going to sell big, but think of if he came back against them now, there would just be enough mystique, and there would be people thinking about, well, Fury's last fight was a win over Klitschko, and really. With how big Joshua is, be a huge seller. I think really that, at this point, when you look at Hearn and Joshua and kind of the read between the lines, they don't want any part of Deontay Wilder. And I think it gets diminished too when Wilder and Joshua are clearly ranked number 1 and number 2, transnational, the ring. And if Joshua is going to be avoiding Wilder, I don't think that's good for boxing.
Wait a second. Hold on. We got to do this now. I apologize to Thomas, but he was offered $12.5 million to fight him.
Well, which is well below market value for the fight and for what Wilder can bring to the table.
So what's Wilder going to do in the meantime? Fight for $2 million?
Well, that's probably what he'll have to do in the meantime. But he's got to maintain his negotiating. Got to maintain his negotiating leverage. He's not going to take short money for the fight.
He doesn't have a negotiating leverage right now. That's why they're offering him $12.5 million.
He's got negotiating leverage in terms of what he brings to the table. He's drawn over $1 million on Showtime for the second Stavern fight and for the Ortiz fight. Joshua didn't draw good numbers on Showtime in the U.S. So
that's 5 o'clock in the afternoon, though.
No, they also replayed it at night.
But who wants to watch a replay?
Either.
I mean, the home
apparently they don't want to watch a replay of Joshua. That's the thing. They don't want to watch Joshua live or a replay. Apparently.
Well, all I know is how many tickets were sold for the Ortiz fight? 5,000 or 6,000. The rest of it is papered, from what everybody told me.
Mike, live gates don't drive sports in the 21st century. TV money does, and if Wilder's bringing 1 million PPV buys in the U.S. at $75 a pop, that's $75 million.
So you think there's 1 million Americans that will pay $75 to watch Deontay Wilder fight?
against Joshua, I think it's possible.
Against Joshua, it's possible, but Joshua can fight almost anybody and probably make $10 or $15 million himself. He could fight a punching bag, and they'd probably put 70,000 people in an arena for him, and he'd get paid. So my point is this.
I agree with that,
Yeah.
but that's not, that's not what's good for boxing. It's not also, though, giving Wilder his value for what he brings to that particular fight.
But I would think that if I'm Anthony Joshua and I'm Hearn, I'm not really worried about what's good for boxing. I'm worried about getting paid, and that's what Hearn's supposed to do for his fighter. And, I mean, the thing is this.
Well,
the ship has
I
sailed
think that's
long
what's gonna
past
happen.
about people caring about the good of boxing.
I mean, I think that's what's going to happen. But the Wilder Joshua is still the biggest money-making fight for both of them. There's no doubt about that. But I agree with you that Joshua has gotten into this position now where in the UK, he can make a lot of money. And let's remember about Brits going to events. When it's Brits involved in the events, that's when they're fanatical and all this money comes. When it's two fighters from other countries, they still fight in Vegas and get a site fee, and sometimes in the past it's been on U.S. pay-per-view, but they don't fight in London.
Yeah. All right. My take on Tyson Fury, Thomas, is this. When I watched Joshua, to me, his shtick looks kind of rehearsed. Deontay Wilder, to me, looks like he's kind of going over top to try to get people's attention. I think the one thing that I really like about Tyson Fury is he is entertaining.
Absolutely. I mean, and he's 6'9", as Joshua, alluded to. He's a big guy, but he's very agile at 6'9". And I feel watching that Klitschko fight, the reason it wasn't such a fan-friendly fight was because of the style fight. Klitschko was not used to fighting a big man who moved around and used his jab. And Fury has freaky long arms, okay? And he clearly won that fight by unanimous decision. In fact, he won, in a better style. If you're a fighter, that's how you want to win a fight, where Joshua got in a lot of trouble. He almost lost that fight against Klitschko. So if you want to compare both fights, you would have to say that Fury fought the smarter fight and won a more clear, fight as far as winning by unanimous decision. I do know that, obviously Joshua did stop Klitschko, so hats off to him on that. But I really, and I also do respectfully disagree. I think that they do need to move Tyson Fury a little bit slower because it has been over 2 years. And I think a couple of tune-up fights before going for that big fight would be a better idea in his case. So he's back in better shape. He's going to continue to get in better shape. And hopefully, I know that Frank Warren mentioned in an interview recently, he's looking at the time frame of maybe about a year's time. So against Joshua, if that's where things go in that direction. And Joshua's drawing 80,000 people. I mean, that's quite a number of people. But yes, of course, TV money is extremely important. I agree there. But I think that's the heavyweight fight everyone would really want to see. And of course, Wilder Joshua is another great fight. And I think they've got to fight real soon. I'd really like to see those two fight, and then Fury fight the winner of that fight.
Yeah, and I think this, John, I think the negotiating, if Fury comes back and wins a couple fights and looks really good, that's going to drop the value of the Wilder fight, I would think, at least until Fury's fought Joshua.
If Fury looks really good, against somebody that we can tell something from, I think that could change the equation a little bit there. But like Thomas said, I mean, I think that would be a great scenario if Fury is going to take tune-ups and Hearn and Joshua would put the Wilder fight together, and then Fury was waiting for the winner. Heck, that'd be a couple of huge fights.
That's what I would like to see happen.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that scenario. I as somebody closely following and covering the sport, what I'm concerned about as somebody covering and following the sport is Anthony Joshua facing lesser opponents for a
Well, Wilder's got to do it for like
two.
38, 39 fights, and you didn't have a problem with it.
Wilder tried to get, Povetkin
here we
in
go,
Russia.
yeah. You know what?
Povetkin tested positive for PEDs.
Nobody made him fight Stavern, no.
Tried to get Ortiz the first time, and then Ortiz tested positive for PEDs. Then he got him the second time, and Ortiz was basically certainly a top 2, top 3 guy before he had the second PED test. So it was a dangerous opponent. It's just that you just don't want to see. I don't want to see things like Anthony Joshua and Kubrat Pulev or things along those lines, or I don't even want to see the Povetkin fight at this point. So, I'd like to see Wilder, Joshua now, and Hearn and Joshua just get to it. But I'm sensing we're going to get some delay here.
Yeah, because Joshua, clearly wants to fight because they offered him $12.5 million. And I'm telling you this, if you're Deontay Wilder and you're thinking you're that much better than him, you go over there, you beat him, you take your $12.5 million home, and then you force him to come back to you, and you hold all the cards.
Yeah, but Mike, you're not going to take lesser money, just like Joshua's not going to take $2 million to fight Wilder to prove he's better.
I don't buy that because
you're not going to do that.
This is the thing, John. If I'm Deontay Wilder, and my guys are telling me you can go fight Anthony Joshua for $12.5 million, or you can fight Dominic Brazil and make $2 million, and then if you beat Joshua, you're going to break the bank. So I don't see why. Put it like this: there's no circumstance where I wouldn't fight somebody for $12.5 million, even if I'm getting the short end of it. But I don't have that much money. So
winning for no fighter, things can happen. Nothing's certain. You got to get your market value for the fight. So Wilder's not going to take short money for the fight, and he shouldn't.
Okay, I just it drives me nuts that Joshua's ducking Wilder, because I think in the end this is the big thing. If Joshua loses to anybody in the meantime, he can get a rematch and make another. He could probably make $20-25 million off a rematch to somebody he lost to. Wilder doesn't have that. If Wilder loses, Wilder has no value at all. So I think this is a huge risk for Wilder, because if Wilder loses in between, nobody wants to see him fight again, because there's not that many that want to see him now.
So, some degree of risk, but it's a smart risk for how much he's being offered below market value. I mean, you saw Vladimir Klitschko this week. He gave an interview to Boxing Scene, and he said, which I've seen with Wilder, when Wilder comes in at that low weight under 220, he's got so much speed to go with that power. He thinks that Wilder is too much for Joshua.
Yeah.
And
boxers are usually the worst people to predict fights.
But I thought it was interesting. Vladimir Klitschko is a smart guy, and I thought his evaluation was good. You're hearing more and more of that. You heard Gassiev say it to Michael Montero, which on exclusive interview had on the Grueling Truth here, and you look at the odds. They're Joshua's a slight favorite now, close to even money. They've tightened up a lot, so I think Joshua and Hearn see what's coming.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and go to the fights this weekend in Belfast. We're going to start off previewing the bantamweight title fight, WBO. Thomas, I know I could say these guys' names, but I want to make sure you can before you go over there to Belfast. So who's fighting in that fight?
Yeah, it's actually a really interesting fight. You've got the two-weight world champion who will be defending his WBO bantamweight championship, Zolani Tete, and he'll be taking on a veteran fighter from Argentina. He's a former 3-time world champion, Omar Narvaez. And, Narvaez actually, he, together with Julio Cesar Chavez, he has the record for the most successful title defenses of a world title, which is 27. And even though he's probably at the tail end of his career, born in 1975. He's now 42 years of age. He's taking on Zolani Tete, and a great opportunity for him to perhaps upset the young hopeful of being a world champion for many more years to come. So I'm intrigued by that fight.
Yeah, what's your take on this one, Jeremiah, since I totally forgot you were with us? Go ahead. You know that's what happens when we start talking Wilder and Joshua.
Yeah. I head to the back seat and I just kind of listen to the radio, but no, Narvaez is actually a guy that I've followed a little bit throughout his career. He actually fought Nonito Donaire. Maybe a lot of people, I don't know if a lot of people remember that performance, but Narvaez was outboxed pretty handily in that fight. Now he's a little bit older. He spent a lot of time in Argentina, defending against good but not great opposition. He's a good stylist. I've always appreciated his style. It's just been one of those things where, he stayed in Argentina too long, so it hasn't been a lot of excitement there. But he's a crafty veteran at this point. Tate is on the rise. He's looked pretty sensational in his last few outings, especially his last defense, which was 9 seconds or something. I mean, all it was his right hook, and then it was over. I mean, it was like a flash in the pan. You go to the fridge to grab a drink or something, and you don't know what happened. But yeah, for me, Tete, again, he looks like he's on the rise. Stylistically, he looks rock solid. He looks like one of the better South African fighters to come out in recent years. Again, with Narvaez's age, I think this is Tete's fight to win, and I expect him to win probably by knockout. Tete's got good size. He's got good hand speed. His power is obviously pretty good. And again, I think Narvaez is just a little too long in the tooth. I saw his fight with Potapov. Yeah, he did. He got his butt beat by anyway, though. He ended up getting stopped in the second round. I remember that fight pretty distinctly. Anyway, he was digging the body real nicely. He was just a bit overmatched there. But I did see his last fight against Nikolai Potapov, and he looked a little rough in there, wasn't clearly winning that fight. So again, at this point, I think Tete is just too much. But I'm hoping that they'll throw him in with Ryan Burnett after this, and I think that would be a big fight in the UK.
Yeah, and I mean, Tete's been fighting over there too in England and the UK, all over. He's fought in Belfast, fought in Liverpool, East London. Do you agree with Jeremiah on this, John?
Yeah, I think Tete is on the rise. He's a huge favorite in the fight. And there's some rumors, bantamweight division, a traditional division. I like as we know, the original 8 divisions. And they're, talk about having a tournament there, a World Boxing Super Series tournament. And, as Jeremiah mentioned, you got Burnett there, who I'm impressed with he's proven to be a very good fighter so far. You got McDonald's going to fight Inoue in Japan, even though he's a big underdog. He's a very underrated fighter, I think, as well. Of course, also from the UK. So, there's some interesting potential matchups there. And, we know there's a lot of guys that are talented that have been fighting at 115. If any of them also move up or even just one, there's a lot of good possibilities there. So I think Tete is getting to be somebody that's more on everybody's radar screen, and he'll probably continue his march on, and he could be on the cusp of getting some bigger fights.
All right, then we go to the main event: Carl Frampton against Nonito Donaire. What's your take on this one, Thomas?
Well, I do know that this is going to be for the vacant WBO Interim World Featherweight Championship. As many of you know, I believe it's Oscar Valdez who's on the shelf with a broken jaw. So this is when, that interim title fight really makes sense. So hopefully the winner of this fight will be fighting Valdez once he's recovered. For Carl Frampton, he wasn't at his best in his last fight. He got the job done, but he had a lot of things going on in his life at the time. I think a lot of people are aware of some of his legal issues he's been having going on. But I've listened to some interviews recently of him. He says he's in tip-top shape. He's got a nutritionist. They've been monitoring his his body fat count and all those things that a top fighter needs to do and to be in top condition. But then Nonito Donaire, obviously a guy who is a veteran fighter who knows how to be ready for those big fights. So he's not going to be at all intimidated by the Belfast crowd. Him himself, a former 3-weight world champion, Frampton, a former 2-weight world champion. So it's an extremely intriguing fight. Frampton, I think he's going to have to really, use his speed and movement. And Donaire, he's one of those guys that can just come out of the pocket and land great shots and hurt a guy quickly. So it's going to be a very interesting fight.
All right, we'll start off with Jeremiah again, just because he gets less airtime than everybody else when somebody brings up heavyweight. When you look at this, Nonito Donaire, since losing his second fight of his career, his only losses have been to Jesse Magdaleno, Nicholas Walters, and Guillermo Rigondeaux, I believe. But the problem is those first and second fights of his career were 17 years ago. Is there any way he's got anything here to be able to go and give Carl Frampton a fight here? Frampton's probably in the prime of his career, and my opinion is I think Frampton will take him out within 6 or 7 rounds.
Yeah, I think, to Donaire's credit, I want to preface what I'm about to say by saying that I like Donaire a lot, because Donaire is one of only 2 fighters in boxing, him and Edwin Rodriguez, who have signed up for 24/7, 365 VADA drug testing. And so he's one of the few guys in the sport that I know is clean. He's taken $20,000 out of his own pocket to volunteer for this. And what you see is a natural progression, you see a natural aging, right? He started off at 112, 115, and he's moved up all the way to 126, and he looks like a natural aging fighter. If there's one thing that's going to be a saving grace in this fight and any other fight until the end of his career, it's power. If there's one thing that he's always had, it's that left hook. You even look at the Nicholas Walters fight, and he ended up getting stopped. But if you remember early on in the fight, he was actually able to hurt Walters. He didn't drop him, of course, but it's just one of those things that he's naturally had, and it'll always be there. As everyone says, it's the last thing to go. But unfortunately, Frampton is too good for that. I expect Frampton will probably be looking out for it, probably keep his right hand high. At this point, Frampton's just fresher. He's quicker. He's just got more stamina. Frampton is just the better fighter at this point. And I think Frampton is probably the best featherweight in the world, honestly. He lost the rematch with Leo Santa Cruz. But it was one of those things where you kind of chalk it up to Frampton having a bad strategy. He got baited into being the aggressor in that one. It just feels like if they have a rubber match, which we were all hoping to happen, the Abner Mares rematch with Leo Santa Cruz was not something that I don't think a lot of fans were asking for that one. But Frampton, to me, feels and looks like the best featherweight in the world. And I expect him to overcome, an elder Donaire here. I do expect him to score a stoppage in the fight, and I think it would be good for his psyche at this point. It's been a while since Frampton scored a stoppage. But I like the prospect of him moving on and taking Oscar Valdez. I think Oscar Valdez, there was a lot of hype. There was a lot of hype for him in the beginning. A lot of people were praising his talent and his well-roundedness. Well, I think Frampton is better rounded. I think he's a superior fighter, and I'm hoping that they make that fight because I think it's a winnable fight for Frampton. After that fight, seeing as they can't make a Leo Santa Cruz third fight, I'd like to see hopefully Santa Cruz fight somebody like Gary Russell Jr., and then they can come together and the winner of that fight can fight the winner of Frampton Valdez. I think it'd be good for the division. It'd be good for the sport. But yeah, I have Frampton by a late round stoppage.
All right, John?
Yeah, I think that Donaire is probably just a little too far past it to be able to pull this one off. I agree with Jeremiah. He still lands the left hook with authority at times. That's the one thing he's got left. But I think Frampton, has a little too much hand speed and boxing ability for Donaire at this point. I think Donaire has still shown enough resiliency that he might be able to. I think he'll go the distance. I think it'll be a decision, but Frampton should win a very clear-cut decision. He's a big favorite in the fight. He's a minus 650 favorite. Donaire's definitely an underdog, and of course we know how good of a fighter Donaire was, but because of his age, and the one thing you can still say for him that could provide a little bit of interest, in addition to the fact that he still can bring that left hook, is the fact that really he has only basically top quality losses. He lost to a better version of Walters at that time, and Rigon Diao, and I think Jesse Magdaleno is one of the most underrated fighters in boxing right now. I'd like to see Top Rank and Bob Arum do more with him and get him in with some better opponents. I think he's actually very underrated. So, Donaire was able to go the distance with him. Magdaleno dominated the fight, but I think that if Donaire was able to go the distance there, I think he can go the distance with Frampton. I do think Frampton potentially matches up well against Valdez. I think Valdez is a little bit overrated. If the WBO is going to try to have this fight after, have that matchup afterward, of course, Valdez is with Top Rank, and I don't know what kind of risks Top Rank wants to take with Valdez, frankly. So, we'll see if that potentially comes off. I would give Frampton a slight edge in that one, but I think, Frampton I think Santa Cruz and Russell Jr., even though he's not that active, I think are probably the top two feathers out there. I do think that Jojo Diaz has improved, so I'm very interested to see him and Russell get it on, which is going to be coming up shortly. And I think that's one of the better fights that's been made recently. I think Jojo Diaz, for me, is a guy that I've seen improvement out of. I think more highly of him than I did a couple of years ago. So, the featherweight division has been one of the better divisions in boxing, and this fight adds to it some with a big name like Donaire and another big name like Frampton. So, featherweight division's pretty healthy right now when these guys are active.
All right, you brought up Joe.
John,
Go ahead.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, Mike, John, I just wanted to add, you were talking, about the featherweight division. You also have Lightning Lee Selby, who is going to be defending his title against Josh Warrington May 9th in Leeds, England. So right there, you have another potential great matchup. Let's just say Lee Selby successfully defends his IBF featherweight title. That can set up a fight there with Frampton.
Yeah, Selby's shown the talent that he can be in there with these other guys. It's just a matter of, and I think he'll beat Warrington. It's just a matter of him getting an opportunity and seeing how it plays out. But he's shown that he has enough talent to be interesting matchups with these other top featherweights.
All right.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, Frampton actually put together a short list, and I think Selby was third. I think he was targeting Valdez and Santa Cruz first, and then Selby. Either one of those are great for boxing, though, and I hope all of them get made.
All right. Just so you know, Thomas, that's what I was going to bring up. But all right, you can interrupt me, Thomas.
Okay.
Since you're the guest. Real quick, the great thing about this Showtime card is people in the States can see it also, correct, Thomas?
Yeah, this event, not only on BT Sport and Box Nation, but anyone in the United States can watch the event as well on the Showtime Network Facebook page, also the Showtime Network website. So I'm not as sure exactly what time. I believe will be going on the air around 4 p.m. local time, or that would probably be around 5 p.m. Eastern. Since we're about 6 hours behind there in the UK.
Are they showing the main event, the whole card? Or?
That's a good question, Mike. Honestly, I don't know that. I believe they might be showing the entire card that BT Sport and Box Nation is covering. But I'm not 100% certain on that. But worst case scenario, you'll get to see the main event there between Carl Frampton and Nonino Donaire. All you got to do is go on the Showtime Facebook page or go on Showtime Network website. So really excited not only for this one, April 21st in Belfast, but also the one I'm announcing May 19th in Leeds, which is the fight we just mentioned between Selby and Warrington. So really glad that Showtime is is carrying these fights in that way.
Yeah, most definitely. I love just the atmosphere over there when they show these fights. And let's face it, usually the undercards beat the hell out of a top-ranked card. Now, Thomas, before we let you go and take a break and come back and preview the Broner fight this week, I randomly from time to time get authors that send me books. And there's a guy by the name of Dan Cisneros who sent me a book called Matt Tales. And we talked for about a half hour on the phone one time. And then after we
I know where you're going with this now.
After we talked, he texted me and he says, "You're friends with Thomas Treiber, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, go directly to chapter 31 of that book." And I did. And it was, "What's Your Name? Samson Cohen versus Chavez Francisco." Do you want to take it from there? Because actually, this is a cool story, especially since your career has turned out so successful.
Well, yeah, and at that time I thought it was over. Well, let me tell you what happened. It was either my second or third time ever ring announcing on ESPN, and I believe it was 1995, and the fight got stopped. It was a TKO win, and I grabbed my microphone, and I go into the ring, and I'm getting the time of the stoppage from the timekeeper, and as I turn around, at the same time that I'm realizing I left my card ringside, I'm getting the cue from the floor director to announce the decision. And my instinct was just to go with it because I was getting my cue. And as I start saying the time and the round and that it was a TKO, in my head I'm going, oh my God, I don't know the guy's name. I don't know the winner's name. So, as I say the time and the round, your winner by technical knockout, and I say, what's your name? And it was Chavez Francisco who won the fight. But as I say, what's your name, it gets picked up on the microphone. So people in the arena, people watching at home, they get a big laugh out of it. And Chavez Francisco only tells me his first name. He says Chavez. So then I just said, Chavez. And I was just, this is live TV. This is ESPN The Deuce, as it was called at the time. And I really thought that I had made a fatal error and that my career was over. But the next morning, it ends up going viral. And this is before the internet things went viral. This was just television. They opened SportsCenter with a clip of me making the blooper. Marv Albert was on David Letterman. He shows my blooper on David Letterman just weeks later. It was I lived in Chicago at the time. And it was all over the Chicago news, so I'm in sports news. So I'm assuming, it happened on other sports outlets. But this was devastating to me. I mean, I really thought, I was being made a mockery of. But thank goodness the promoter gave me a call. His name is Larry Carrier. He had a son by the name of Mark Carrier, who was a heavyweight fighter. And Larry Carrier actually owned the Bristol International Raceway in Bristol, Tennessee. And this night that this happened to me, we were actually in Johnson City, Tennessee. But Larry called me and said, "Look, Thomas, don't worry, you're going to be doing my next show." And he had a 5-fight deal with ESPN The Deuce. So, and like I said, I believe it was my second or third time on there. And I did the next show, and I learned from my mistake, and I never again have forgotten my card going into the ring. But that's the thing about being a ring announcer. If you make a mistake, the key is to learn from that mistake and not let that happen again. And unfortunately for me, but then again, fortunately, because of the exposure, it was a learning experience on live national TV. And I actually ended up even on the Best of Sports bloopers tape as well. A friend of mine gave it to me as a gift, and I opened it up, and it was Best of Sports bloopers, and he says, "You're on there." And I was like, holy smokes, so it was an interesting situation. But yeah, Daniel Cisneros out of New Mexico contacted me and interviewed me and asked me if I'd be kind enough to share my story in his book. And I said, of course, it was something I learned from, and thankfully my career has moved in the right direction since then. But thanks for bringing it up. I thought everybody had forgotten.
Well,
I bring it up because never give up.
Yeah, we're going to have Dan on. His book is called Matt Tales, True Stories from the Bizarre, Brutal World of Pro Boxing. Very good book. I'm about halfway through it, which means we'll have him on in the next week or two. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. Thomas, once again, as always, it's great having you on.
Hey, thank you very much, guys. I'm off to Belfast Wednesday. I'll be arriving there Thursday, but I'm back in the States late Sunday. So if you want to recap anything when I get back from Belfast, I'd love to do it. And you guys are all very educated on the sport of boxing, and it's always an honor and a privilege to be able to share my thoughts on things. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah. So we'll just plan maybe next Monday night, same time.
I'm in. Count me in.
And we might have to go Wednesday. I just remembered that. I coach a high school football team, and we actually got a camp next week. But I'm open Wednesday. Are you good with that, John and Jeremiah?
Should be good for me.
I'll join in.
Awesome.
All right. So
I'll be looking forward to it, guys.
All right. Well, once again, thanks to Thomas Treiber. Make sure you watch him on Showtime's Facebook page, website, wherever you can find Showtime. You'll be able to watch the fights, see Thomas call him in there, and watch Frampton against Donaire, which should be a highly entertaining fight. So, Thomas, thank you. And everybody else, we will be back in a minute after this commercial break to take a look at Broner-Vargas and that card, which comes up Saturday night.
Hey, Puckheads, this is Patrick.
And Jason.
From the Puck Guys podcast at the Grueling Truth Network, and we're here with one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money.
The Grueling Truth has partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And that's why the Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag.
In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now, and MyBookie.ag will give you a 50% bonus on your first deposit of up to $3,000 in extra cash. Just enter the promo code TGT50. That's TGT50 to take advantage of this offer. Where do they got to go, Jay?
That is a smart-looking question, Pat. They need to go to visitmybookie.ag, courtesy of the Grueling Truth Network, and enjoy your winning today.
MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, we're back on Inside Boxing Weekly. Once again, we want to thank Thomas Treiber for coming in and talking to us about the Frampton-Donaire card. This moves us on to the fights here in the States. We're going to start off with John, and we're going to go Jesus Cuellar against Gervonta Davis. I think this is a solid matchup, especially since I think Cuellar is a little underrated, and I think Davis is a little overrated.
I think this is not a bad fight, even though Davis is a significant favorite. I mean, Cuellar's proven to me he's a good fighter. You know, he's a legit top 10 type guy as a featherweight. You know, this is going to be at 130 pounds. He was fighting extremely well, but he just didn't perform well in his last fight against Abner Mares, who had his best performance in a long time. He had Robert Garcia in his corner for that fight. He looked rejuvenated, and his hand speed and boxing ability appeared back, and Cuellar just could not deal with it. I think if he gets a good version of Gervonta Davis Saturday night, that means he's going to be in trouble, because the good version of Gervonta Davis to me is not overrated. Then he brings power, speed, and some boxing ability. But now all three of us, I believe, agreed that the Gervonta Davis that showed up on the undercard of Mayweather and McGregor, which was a great opportunity for exposure, and was completely out of shape, dreadfully unprepared against a complete unknown, and just performed just terribly. I hate to be this negative, but I can't help it. I don't see what's changed where Gervonta Davis is going to make 130 pounds for this fight. That I haven't seen that discussed that much this week. That's at the forefront of my mind for this one. I don't care about the alphabet stuff, and, you know, so there's some kind of alphabet thing involved, but I don't care about that. It's just that the weight limit for the fight set at 130. So I don't see Gervonta Davis making 130, and then Cuellar's coming up from 126 pounds, which normally that 4-pound weight difference wouldn't mean much, but here's where it changes, is that if Cuellar's coming up from 126 and Gervonta Davis is going to come into the fight at 135 or something like that, it's going to go on anyway, then Cuellar's probably going to be in a heap of trouble. So I think it's a pretty, but the style matchup's entertaining. So I don't think it'll be a boring fight as long as it lasts, whatever happens. So I kind of like the style matchup. Cuellar will be kind of there for Davis, and Cuellar, usually throws some punches, decent pop. But I think that, this should be a chance for Gervonta Davis to get back on track if he's any kind of decent shape. And that might not mean making 130 still, but I mean, if he's like at least in shape and he's not going to make it and he looks like he's in shape, unlike that last outing when he was just dreadfully out of shape, he's a young guy. If he's going to start a pattern of doing things like that and he's way out of shape, then he's going to lose out on his potential. And I think we're already at that point. Is he going to establish a pattern of being out of shape? Then maybe he's going to be somebody we look at like maybe an Adrian Broner, potential that might not have been fully realized, or is he going to get back on track? That's what this matchup really means for me and probably a lot of people. But I think Davis should get back on track and should be able to handle Cuellar. And I'll say stoppage, but after what happened last time, there's a lot of question marks here.
Well, I may be wrong here, Jeremiah, but I would actually be really surprised if Gervonta Davis ends up being as successful as Adrian Broner even.
Yeah, I think you're right. And my impression initially was that Gervonta Davis had already committed to 135 pounds. I mean, I figured that he'd just kind of, leave 130 as it is and, just try to make a lasting imprint north. But I guess if he's fighting, Cuellar at 130 and, he's hoping to, wrap some stupid trinket around his waist. Okay, that's fine. But I'm with John in the sense that I do think it's an interesting styles matchup because Cuellar is he's a good pressure fighter. I mean, he's a bit like Marcos Maidana in a sense. I don't think punch for punch he's hitting as hard as Maidana, but he has, that kind of rawness. Technically he's not sharp. He goes to the body quite a bit. He'll overwhelm you with volume, and that's kind of why I find it an interesting styles match, because if Gervonta Davis is not on top of his game, if he does show up out of shape, then it's possible that Cuellar overwhelms him with volume and stops him later. But I do think because of Gervonta Davis's last performance, I do think he's going to show up in shape. I do think he's going to get it together. I think he's got to make an impression this time. And, therefore, I see him being as sharp as we're used to seeing him before his last fight. Therefore, I think he's just going to be too fast, too hard hitting for Cuellar. I think Cuellar's probably not going to be used to the southpaw position. And I think Davis is going to score a fairly early stoppage here. Again, I do like Cuellar, and I do think he could potentially pose problems. But I think Davis, again, I think that he's seen what he's done. And he's going to improve it at least for this fight. But I do have, like you both, I do have issues with Davis himself. There's been a lot of Broner comparisons lately. I'm not quite sure he's the hardest worker in the gym. If he wants to make 130, maybe he's using that Canelo clenbuterol to get down there. I'm just joking there, of course, but he just seems like a guy with too many issues outside the ring. Doesn't seem like the hardest worker inside the ring. I've seen that he is training with Adrian Broner. I'm not quite sure how that's going. But back to your original question, Mike. I don't see him being as successful as Adrian Broner. I mean, Broner to me could have been the man at 135 if he dedicated himself and left, kept the conditioning right, didn't do a bunch of dumb stuff. He could have been the man at 135. Davis, to me, he's not going to be the man at 130. He's not going to be the man at 135. A guy, even Floyd Mayweather was on Showtime saying that maybe he's going to throw him to Lomachenko. You put Davis in with Lomachenko or Mikey Garcia if he ever comes back down to 135. It's just not happening for him.
No, there's no way that's happening for him. But I hope they do, because I would love to see him take a shot at it. Next up.
I just want to say real quick, maybe that's what Mayweather realizes. Maybe Mayweather realizes that he has an Adrian Broner-type fighter on his hands, and he's like, I might as well cash him out now before, the wheels start to fall off the bus.
Or maybe, how about this? An Adrian Broner-type fighter, but if you take him real young and you throw him in a sink-or-swim fight against Vasyl Lomachenko, maybe you get the best out of him. You probably don't.
Yeah, you got to remember. You got to remember this guy's very young. I mean, I think he could still get on track. That's again what I want to see Saturday. I'm not saying he definitely will, because I really didn't like what I saw the last fight. I agree with Jeremiah. I thought he was going to make the smart move, 135 pounds, lightweight, traditional division. No need to worry about an extreme weight cut. He didn't need it. He's strong enough and he hits hard enough anyway. And then here he is taking this 130-pound fight, which leads to problems with these issues. I don't get it. I like, Cuellar's a good fighter, so I like the matchup in that sense, but I just don't get why he's trying the 130-pound thing. Seems to me to be a recipe for another problem. But I still think, in theory, Davis is so young that were he to have been on the track he was before that last fight, and let's say, this is theoretical, of course, but in shape, gradually working up his level of opposition over a couple fights, I would want to see him in those big fights. He'd be an interesting opponent for these people, but certainly you're not going to take somebody like a Vasyl Lomachenko on when you're not in shape and you're a very young guy who's having problems with conditioning, and you haven't really built up your experience level on higher level opponents yet. Anyway, that's not a good moment to be in with a guy like Lomachenko. But Robert Easter is with PBC. He's a lightweight. You've got Comey coming off a great performance against Alejandro Luna. To me, right with the PBC guys there at 135, if Davis was there, a lot of good matchups right there. So I don't quite get it.
Yeah, but I think he loses both of those fights just from what I've seen, just because of the lack of a work ethic. And the one thing we know Comey and Easter do have is they do work, and they're always in shape.
Yeah, he can't be like he was the last fight. There's no argument there.
Yeah. And it's really hard to be a guy that screws off like that, and then all of a sudden you're going to turn it on against somebody that always shows up ready to go, which brings me to my next point, which is live Thursday at 1 o'clock. We'll have lightweight champion, or one of the lightweight champions. You know how that is. Robert Easter will be on the show 1 o'clock, where I'll be interviewing him Thursday, so make sure you tune in there. Next up, we got Jamal Charlo, who will, I'm assuming without looking, defend some kind of title, one way or the other, against Hugo Centeno. Actually, it is the interim WBC World Middleweight title, whatever the hell that is. But I think Centeno is a decent fighter, but I think he's going to get knocked out here, and I think it's going to happen very quickly. John, agree or disagree?
I'm having trouble figuring out. I mean, Centeno Jr. is a good fighter, and he's a massive underdog, one of the biggest underdogs I've seen lately at a minus 3,800. Charlo's at minus 3,800. I've liked Charlo a lot for a while, but he really got fought evenly by Austin Trout. Centeno Jr. lost to, Soljecki, who's a very good fighter. He got stopped late. So I don't know if there's that much shame there, but, this kind of speaks to me. This speaks highly of Jamal Charlo. I'd have to say that, the smart money and the odds makers have a very, very high opinion of Jamal Charlo, and I have too. But again, Trout did give him a lot of trouble, and you saw Hurd get Trout out of there. So, I still like Jamal Charlo a lot, one of the top middleweights in the world, to me, no doubt. A threat to be the number one guy in the middleweight division. A lineal champion type threat. He's got that kind of ability, and that is the best guys in the sport. But Centeno Jr. is coming off a great KO over Emmanuel Alim, who's a very tough fighter, who had knocked off the undefeated Ukrainian Heatroff, who was highly touted, and I thought a lot of him myself. So, and Centeno's a very tall guy, so he's not undersized or anything like that. We know Jermall Charlo's got good size, but Centeno Jr. has good size too. But Charlo's a massive favorite, and I've liked him, and I like his power a lot. And since Centeno has been stopped by Siljecki, who's not a big puncher, you'd have to think Charlo's going to win this fight by knockout, maybe by the middle rounds. But I'm impressed that Jermall Charlo is that heavy of a favorite for this fight.
Well, you got to remember this too. With the Jarrett Hurd Austin Trout fight, that was like a year and 5 months after Charlo fought him, and he had been active for a year and 5 months. Both fighters had trouble with Austin Trout. Austin Trout, wasn't as good as either one of them anymore. But I think their performances, when you consider the year or the 16, 17-month layoff in between the Charlo and Hurd fight for Trout, I think you're looking at performances that were really similar, Jeremiah.
Well, and funny enough, Austin Trout is getting a shot at Jermall's brother, Jermell. So, I guess, kudos to Trout. He's out there getting some paydays. And if I'm not mistaken, he's still in a lawsuit with the WBO, suing him for $40 million for taking him out of their rankings. I'm not sure how well that's going. I haven't heard an update on that. Hopefully he wins. Yeah. Hopefully, can we just bankrupt them? Yeah. Anyways, I think the reason that Charlo is such a heavy favorite is Centeno did look good against Alim. I mean, the left hook that he landed was sensational. I mean, it was a fantastic punch. But watching Centeno get clearly outboxed by the Polish contender, you just look stylistically and you think, well, Charlo he's a bit sharper technically than the Pole. He hits harder than the Pole. Yeah, and I think, it's only reasonable to think, Charlo's probably going to win that fight. I still have a heavy favorite here. That's how I see the fights. It's just, in my opinion, he looks better. He looks like one of the 5 best middleweights in the world, in my opinion. Charlo has looked pretty damn good, and I'm a big fan of what Ronnie Shields built from the ground up. Both fighters, both Charlos have really good jab. Technically, they're real sharp. They're just well-rounded. They've improved their power recently. But Charlo, to me, he just looks like he has too much. I think he's probably going to stop him late. I actually think Julian Williams is a better fighter than Centeno. I would say, 8th, 9th round stoppage. Charlo is going to get it done. The whole interim nonsense doesn't make any sense. I don't know what the alphabet soup organizations are doing there. It seems like they're just lining their pockets, adding to the coffers. There is no interim. There's no interim. Golovkin Golovkin is active. Again, we've been over this time and time again. And Suleiman and all these, Mendoza, they should all be ashamed of themselves. This is all just. I don't know if they're trying to. I don't know if the WBC is still trying to pay Raggiani, the Italian German that they screwed over, back in the 90s, or maybe it was the early 2000s when they demoted him from full champion to interim champion or champion in recess, whatever the hell it was. And then, they won the lawsuit of $31 million. I don't know what they're trying to do. Are they paying? I'm not exactly sure why they're charging all these guys and making all these stupid titles nowadays, but there's no interim. But I guess if you look at it, you understand the way the game is. What this means is Charlo's going to be in line to fight Golovkin, and that's got to be a good thing.
All right, next up we got the main event, Adrian Broner. He's all about billions. That didn't turn out too good for him. I guess Jesse
billion
Vargas,
calories.
Yeah, I guess Jesse Vargas. They're going to fight this at welterweight, and of course Broner's had some problems from time to time, as we know. Vargas is a tough guy, and what are the odds on this, John?
They are, which you rarely see, they are like exactly even money, -110,
Really?
-110. So I was thinking this was a close one, but I didn't know it was quite that close.
Well,
so,
see, I thought they may
just
go with Broner with the big odds, and then I could have made some money because I really think Vargas is going to win this fight.
I'm going to go with Vargas as well. I think both of these guys, and why it's even money to me, is they both, to me, do have a lot of similarities. Both guys have been knocked down in their career, but they have good chins. They both are boxers who don't throw a lot of punches, which is not a good thing. Cautious boxers who don't throw a lot of punches. Vargas fell short against Pacquiao. We've seen Broner fall short against Mikey Garcia.
But Vargas did beat Saddam Ali, which is now looks like a
right.
good win.
Well, I was going to get to that because that, to me, is what separates the two of them and why I'm going with Vargas. Very close. I think Broner's actually a little bit better of a puncher. Neither of them are really as welterweights. Guys that are really going to stop people. Even though Vargas did land that shot on Saddam Ali and stopped him, it really was an aberration for Vargas. But that win's sticking out because Ali had looked good before that, and then Ali looked good against Cotto. So I think that's really what separates the two to me. They both, I actually feel, are guys that have a lot of similarities. Broner, though, has had the out of the ring problems, and Jesse Vargas did not look good in his last fight where he joined PBC and fought a journeyman. But what I liked about that was Jesse Vargas himself said in post-fight interviews, nobody had to say it for him. He's like, look, I should have been sharper against this guy. I should have had a more impressive performance. And it just shows me he knew how to self-evaluate. He knows he's got some work to do on some things. And, with all the problems that Broner's had, I think that just gives Vargas enough of an edge that I think he gets a decision. It's a very competitive, close matchup, close to call, but which is good to make. But the problem is the style matchup is not good, and I don't particularly like the style matchup for a main event here. Competitive, yes. Style-wise, I don't like the matchup, but I'll go with Vargas here.
So I'm going with Vargas too, but see, I think the biggest key to this fight that a lot of people are missing, Jeremiah, is this. How big of an effect do you think it'll have, Jeremiah? That big fat guy that brushes Broner's hair, do you think that will play into this at all?
It depends on how quickly he brushes his hair before the fight, because I think it acts as sort of like a power-up. So it's like Mario eating a mushroom, you know what I mean? So he gets his hair brushed, and I think it acts as a stimulant, and then his stamina is improved by,
so
I think, threefold.
If it's a stimulant, is it on the banned substance list?
I don't know. I think it's is the hairbrush on there? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, stylistically, I don't think this is a great fight. I am with John. I mean, you look at the way Vargas was boxing, and you see Mike McCollum, his new trainer, rubbing off on him. I mean, he stuck behind the jab. He was boxing well. He was counterpunching well. But there was an explosiveness there. I mean, say what you want about Broner. I mean, at least he can provide a little bit of that for you. I mean, he was able to drop Porter, I think, in the last round. He showed some late round power in other fights, I think, against Emmanuel Taylor. So I do think that Broner is the bigger puncher here. I do like that, they've kind of met terms, and, with Vargas being a full-blown welterweight now, he's still willing to, to move down a little bit. And Broner, say what you want about him. Broner's willing to fight anybody and everybody, and I like that. But I think the reason why it's about even money is because it feels like both guys are so close. With Vargas, it feels like he's so close to losing a lot. I mean, anybody who's followed Vargas's career, I mean, he arguably lost against Josecito Lopez early on. I mean, he had a real tough fight against Wael Matosa. I mean, he barely beat Khabib Alkmaev. I think he was outworked by Nabokov, but still earned a decision. He didn't look particularly good against, Antonio DeMarco. So Vargas just feels like one of those guys who, for me, he's a fringe level guy. He's always going to be. He's not going to be a guy who can beat the best. He'll always be always.
They're both fringe level guys, I think.
It's true. Well, and the problem with Broner is he has the ability to be better than a fringe level guy, but fighting at this weight, it's just going to be tough. I mean, at 140, I do think that Broner's still he's still going to be effective enough to be close to a top 5 player. I mean, with Prograis and others, entering the division, I think it's going to be tougher for him, but I still think that he has the ability to hang with the best of the best in that division. But it's just a real close one to call. I mean, is this the Vargas we're going to get? Or are we going to get the boxer Vargas who's going to stick and move? And I think that's what John is kind of alluding to, is that it might not be stylistically appealing because we might get that Vargas. He might jab and move and try to counterpunch Broner. We know how Broner is. I mean, Broner's he's always trying to pot shot you. He doesn't stick the jab out there like he should. Both of these guys don't really engage as much as we'd like them to. So, I see why the odds makers are there. And, seeing as Broner hasn't had much success above 140, his best win being against Paulie Malignaggi, a faded Paulie Malignaggi in a real close fight. I think you guys are probably right to favor Vargas. I'm going to pick Broner, though. I want to pick Broner just so we're not all in unison here. I'm going to say Broner is fast enough to pot shot him and hit him with the right hand enough to earn a decision here.
Yeah, I think the fight's a complete toss-up anyways. I also think that it's very boring, other than the fact that, I just want Vargas to win because Mike McCallum was on our show that one time.
You can't blame me there.
Yeah, if Broder would have came on the show, or that big fat guy that brushes, it would be awesome to get the big fat guy that brushes his hair on.
Yeah, can we do that?
We're going to try. I don't know his name. If anybody out there knows his name, send me his name, and I'll see if we can get a hold of the big fat guy that brushes Adrian Broner's hair. And then we'll
it's his
see
father.
Exactly. I know. I don't really care.
One thing I will say
to call him the big fat guy.
Let's ask him about some nacho recommendations.
I would say if Broner wins, though, the hair brushing thing is good showmanship. So if he does win, then the hair brushing thing could carry him on
it's
to
kind
another
of girlish.
significant fight.
That's why I make fun of it. See, an actual real man wouldn't have hair. He'd shave his head because that's what a warrior does. Real men don't have hair. Both of you guys do. I just thought I would bring that up. Marvin Hagler doesn't. Me and Marvin Hagler don't.
Well, you know what, Mike? Actually, I cut my long hair a long time ago, so I'm about at a buzz cut right now. So
that doesn't count. You still got hair. You got to cut it. Shave it all off.
I'm not baking this, but yeah, let's bring Broner's father on, and he's obviously eating well, so let's see if he's got some recommendations for restaurants around.
I don't think that he eats a lot. I think he's just got like a slow metabolism and thyroid problems, probably, because most really enormous people over 400 pounds I've ever seen, when you talk to them, they don't eat that much. They just have thyroid problems and stuff. John,
Mike created silence. Mike created silence. You created silence.
Well,
I'll leave it to the critics.
Have you ever watched Jerry Springer? They'll have the woman sitting there where fat folds are folding over each side of the chair, and somebody will jump up and say, "Well, that fat ass just eats too much." And then she goes, no, honey, I got a slow metabolism. I only eat 2 small meals a day. But those 2 small deals are a cow and a horse.
And then she pulls a bagel out of her fat rolls and spreads it. Yeah, with I've seen that. I used to watch a lot of Jerry Springer.
That one time.
This was a bad episode. Bad memory. Let's not go there.
All right, guys. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to wrap this up because we're an hour and 10 minutes in, and I've done a lot of talking this week. I'm about talked out. We apologize to Adrian Broner's father, but if he ever wants to come on the show and explain to us exactly the pattern that he brushes Broner's hair in, that would be awesome. All right,
looks
guys.
like he owns a barbershop.
Remember, Thursday afternoon, 1 o'clock Eastern on thegruelingtruth.net and on Spreaker.com. We will be live with, what is he, IBF lightweight champion, isn't he?
That is correct.
All right, I'm disappointed that you guys knew that because we're supposed to be ignoring alphabet titles. But IBF lightweight champion
we should pretend we don't know that, but we know it.
Yeah, Robert Easter will be on the show. Then you can catch our weekly show next Wednesday night. We'll have Thomas Treiber on to talk about Frampton-Donaire, that card, maybe a little bit more Tyson Fury conversation, so me and John can argue about Wilder and Joshua. Go check us out on iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.